welcome everybody to Why Are You an Entrepreneur? The Trials and Triumphs. I'm Maureen Edwards. I'm the founder of 8 Simple Steps, and I bring you rockstar entrepreneurs every single week, and this is no exception. I have Marc Ronick, who is the CEO of like the coolest name I have heard in a long time. CEO of IRonick, and he's going to get into it a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey, why he's doing what he's doing. And I think, like I said, this is the coolest name. So I'd like to hear how this came about. Marc, welcome.
Well, thank you, Maureen. I appreciate it. And I'm glad you like the name.
Well, I'm all about branding and names of companies. It's just so critical. And, one of the reasons that I, even created this LinkedIn Live was to make sure that we as entrepreneurs are able to reach out to other small business owners and startup entrepreneurs who are walking that journey and need some inspiration. They need some tips, some resources. They need some wisdom from people like yourself who can help them along. Everybody getting as much information as possible can only make a difference for them. So that's why I am so pleased to have you here tonight. And I can't wait to dive in. You and I have kind of had conversations, but never live. I'm actually just finding out, I think, when I looked on your LinkedIn profile to learn more about you, that you are from Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I'm outside of Annapolis, Maryland, and I never knew. I know. I'm like, I could have had a cup of coffee with you.
That's true. And you know what? Your time is running out because I actually am moving to Asheville, North Carolina at the end of the month.
Wow. And you did mention that to me, and congratulations, because that is a beautiful area. And so I just thought it was interesting that, people's path cross, and sometimes you don't even know it. So
I had no idea. What a shame, being that I'm leaving soon, but hopefully I will absolutely be back a lot because I have a lot of family still here. So we will have to do that in person one of these days coming up.
Absolutely. I would love it. So I do want to dive into this because I would like to learn more about your story. First, tell people exactly what your company is about and what you do.
Okay, sure. My company started just before the pandemic. And initially, the goal, the mission was to produce podcasts for other people, because I know there are a lot of podcasters out there and some don't have the time or don't want to have the time to do a lot of the production work. So, being that I've been doing this now for 16 years, I decided, what the heck, I can be that person for those people. So I put it out there. I grabbed a few people I knew that I believed would be good podcasters and have a good message to share with the world. And I asked them if I could do their podcast for them pro bono, because I wanted to get some names under my belt, a resume built under the umbrella of IRonick Media. So they agreed, and we got started and kicked off the first 2 of 3 shows right at the pandemic, because obviously we had no idea going into the production of their podcast that this would be a thing. And we did it anyway, and it turned out to be a great thing. Their podcasts are still going today. And what ended up happening was I found myself coaching a lot of people, coaching them with their how to podcast, their approach, giving them ideas, thoughts, different ways of looking at it, helping them with their mindset, which is a big one for a lot of new podcasters, a lot of new podcasters, feeling like they really they're not supposed to be doing it. They think that, who am I to have a podcast, right? So I work with people on that as well. So my business has evolved into both production and more heavily, which I didn't expect, coaching podcasters. So that's kind of the background in where I am today.
I love this. Okay, so I have so many questions.
Okay.
Before the pandemic, were you in a full-time job and started this maybe on the side to test the waters and then dive in full-time? Or did you leave a job and say, this is what I'm doing, I'm going full force?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I've always been an entrepreneur in some regard. Even when I was 16 years old, I had created a comic book magazine because back then, I don't like to tell my age, but back then there was no websites, there was no
Mhm.
internet to do that. So I created a magazine that would have been the equivalent to a website for comic books, and we talked all about comic books, right? And I would go to my local comic book stores and pitch them on selling it and putting it on the racks, and they would get a cut of it, and it worked out really well for my last couple of years of college. And yeah, so I've always been doing it, and most of the time, most of my entrepreneurial endeavors have been part-time, on the side kind of thing. And this one was no different. I was a TV producer for the 5 years leading up to my business, and the last year where we ended up being home because of COVID, I was able to manage both very well and very easily. So, what ended up happening was at the very end of 2020, the TV production company said that because of the pandemic, they were letting a lot of people go, which
Yeah.
actually I would say was a blessing in disguise, but it really wasn't disguised. It was just a blessing because I was ready to be done with it and get out of it and focus fully on this business. So I'm actually grateful that it all worked out that way. And I think that the pandemic actually helped my business grow because where everyone was home, more and more people started podcasting. I call them, instead of podcasters, I call them pancasters, due to the pandemic.
Oh, I
So,
get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we had lots of. I ended up getting lots and lots of clients, and so yeah, I needed the full time at that point as the business started growing in the first year.
I love this because I have people on here. One, there's a common theme.
Mhm.
People have been entrepreneurs their whole life, like whether it's a lemonade stand or not. So it's in your blood.
Yes.
Second, a lot of people are doing what I call the side hustle, or kind of everybody calls the side hustle. I want to come up with a better name for that because I think a lot of people are taking on side endeavors with the hope that they're planning their future to leave a company.
Mhm.
It is great timing on your endeavor here because maybe you would have never had the push out the door because sometimes that's a hard decision to make, and you got the push without really asking for it, and now you realize that was the best thing that ever happened. It's opportunities come our way. And what's interesting, Mark, is that you could have said, I'll keep doing this as the side thing and I'll go get another job.
Yeah.
But you didn't. You said, I'm going
No.
to take the risk. I'm going to go for it.
No, and maybe that also is due to the pandemic because I think probably if that were the case, who knows if there would have been something available for me at that point. So again, it worked out really well. Yeah, I think I don't know. I might have stayed in that job if they hadn't let me go because I had started that job because I had a business prior that was doing okay, but it just wasn't paying the bills. So I had to go
Mhm.
out and find a job and found this TV job. And yeah, I think maybe I could have been a little scared in that moment at that time to have actually just left. But thankfully, it just worked out well for me.
Entrepreneurs are calculated risk takers, and sometimes we are pushed to move forward. All right.
Absolutely.
So I love having conversations. This is completely off the cuff. We do not plan these conversations. I don't even send you a questionnaire
Nope.
because I like to see where it goes. And so I'm going to back up to that other company you had before you decided to go into maybe getting a full time job that's a little bit steadier. Can you tell me what the greatest challenges were with that company that made you decide that you did have to go back into the workforce? So I get into the nitty gritty of it. I hope
Yeah.
you'll share it with people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the biggest challenge was it wasn't making enough money. Um, I think that the big challenge for me was I think I was too focused on competing with another company. So I started that other business was a podcast network. So what I did was grabbed a bunch of small podcasts and put them all under the same umbrella. And the whole idea, the whole concept was power of numbers. Well, if we're all a little bit smaller of a podcast as far as our audience goes, then maybe we could all come together and get out to a bigger audience. And it actually did work pretty well. But as far as financially, it just wasn't generating the dollars enough for me to sustain my way of life, right? So, but back to the competition thing, I had been with another podcast that was a very large podcast as far as their audience goes. They were getting like 20,000 downloads a day. And I had, for them, they had hired me to help them with their business. And one of the things we did was created a network with them and had several different podcasts as part of their network. And when I left, unfortunately, it wasn't on the best of terms. And so I think in the back of my mind, I was letting that drive the business idea. And that it wasn't really my passion. It wasn't really what drove me. And so I think that was really its biggest problem, because now with this business, the biggest difference is I have such a passion and love for it, especially for when I'm working with other podcasters and I'm showing them that they can do it. I'm giving them that permission. I'm helping them with their plan, and seeing those light bulbs go off and them having those aha moments. That's the passion, and that's the thing that drives me that I didn't have with my old business.
So do you think that ego got in the way with that other company that kind of drove some of the decisions?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been a big lesson for me over these past 2.5 to 3 years now with this business, is learning a lot more about the ego and how poorly it can work for you. And being able to identify when that ego is speaking to you, and making sure you're actually making a good decision versus, we'll call it, egotistical decision.
Yeah. You know, I always say there is no ego in business because it really does stifle the growth of both the entrepreneur and, of course, then stifles the growth of the company. But I think it is something that people have to overcome. And ego comes in many forms, but I have seen it come where people refuse to reach out for any help. They think they can do it all. They can wear all those hats. They can juggle it. It's their company and they don't want to share it, and they don't really have any self-awareness sometimes or introspection about their own gaps,
Yeah.
right? We all
Yeah.
have gaps, and capitalize on our strengths, but then seek other people who could complement us. And I don't know about you, but that's my experience with I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and when I really dig deep into it, the common denominator is they think they can do it all, and that's where ego comes in.
Yeah,
So
I think you hit the nail on the head. It does start with awareness. And when our egos are dominating our thoughts, I think that we can't have that awareness. It doesn't allow us to have that awareness. And I think that is where finding a coach, whether it's a life coach, a business
mhm.
coach, that kind of thing, that's what made the change for me. When I started to tell you this, 2.5 years ago, that I also had brought on a coach at that time when I started my business. And that helped me with awareness. He helped me recognize those things and helped me realize I can't do it all alone, and that I do have to look to contracting or hiring people to come in and take over certain areas of the business so that I can focus on what I'm best at, and I can be aware when that ego comes in.
I love that. So for people out there, I think that the people I've had on here, including myself, have said to you, there are people who have walked this journey, who have wisdom and knowledge out there, and they're willing to share it with you. They want you to be successful. So please seek those people out. So I want to talk a little bit about the current company now that you have.
Okay.
So you have more passion for it. You love working with the podcasters. I mean, that takes you, a long way. But is there a particular challenge that you have in this company that you've had to overcome or you're still working on?
I mean, I think that there will always be some sort of challenge because as we grow, as we evolve, we face new challenges as we go. I think the current one that I'm dealing with, Maureen, and I've only discussed this publicly one other time. I think the challenge is actually embracing the fact that I have ADD, I have ADHD, and I've known it since my early 30s. And I was, given some medicine and said, this will help, and sent me on my way. And yes, the medicine did help and does help. I think, though, I needed somebody to also provide me with tools and with education on how this ADHD brain works. Because it's not that it's a broken brain, it's just a
Oh,
brain that thinks differently
yeah,
and acts differently.
yeah.
And I think these past 2.5 years, I've felt lots of resistance when trying to learn something new, when trying to incorporate something new into my business. I felt this resistance. I had confusion. I didn't know, how I was going to figure it out. And all of a sudden, call it intuition, I kept hearing, you got to deal with your ADHD. You got to deal with your ADHD.
Yeah.
And I started researching it more and more, started recognizing, you know what, I'm not the only one, and that these things that I struggle with is something that everybody who has ADHD struggles with, or at least in some way, shape, or form. And so I've actually just recently hired an ADHD coach who's also emphasizes in business as well. So I'm actually just getting started with that, and I'm really excited about it. So that's how I'm currently working to overcome that big challenge that I've been dealing with.
I love this. Again, it goes back to self awareness. It goes back to saying, there are some things that could prevent me from having a super lucrative company, allowing me to serve people who need what I have. But I need to identify a few gaps that could be preventing that,
Yeah.
and do something with it. It's one thing to identify it. Okay, I got this, but then what are you going to do with it? And I will tell you, the ADHD brain does work differently, but there are so many strengths to it because you have so many ideas.
Yeah.
It's a creativity thing. You just don't know where to put them,
Right. Right.
right?
Yes.
You just don't know how to focus on them long enough to bring them to fruition. So I'm so glad that you're finding somebody, again, who's going to be able to give you the tools and the resources, because it's only going to take your business to the next level. So
Yeah.
again, people out there, Marc is sharing something very personal too. But actually, I think this is what makes you good at what you do, because you can also, I think, when I look at this, is you're guiding people and you
Yeah.
can identify things in them to help them overcome it, knowing that
Yeah.
it's the same situation.
Absolutely. And I have a feeling that my business will evolve again. And it may, at some point, once I really understand and study this, I think I'll be helping people with ADHD even more, being more specific, with maybe it's ADHD podcasters. I don't know yet, but I have a feeling this is going to be a path that's going to be a long and enjoyable path. I think I'm going to learn a lot from it, and I think I'm going to help a lot of other people learn as
All
well.
right. So are you thinking maybe you'll come up with a podcast for business owners who have ADHD and, be able to help guide them and bring guests on, or do whatever you podcasters do to get your message out there? Am I like thinking the evolution here could be going in that direction?
That's absolutely one thing that I've been thinking of for sure. Yes.
I may hold you to that. All right. So I have a question about podcasting, because
Okay.
a lot of people would like to use it as a marketing tool, not as their main business. And so, what advice can you give to people who have a company and would like to use podcasting as, I guess, brand awareness, lead gen, not necessarily monetizing that podcast, but getting more exposure. Do you think that's a good idea? How should they go about it? Does it take too much time to dedicate to that? That would take away from their business. What would be your advice about using that in that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, you listed some of the key points as to why it's great to have a podcast. It does build brand awareness, it builds your authority. And what I really love about it, especially for business owners or business people who are using it to increase their business, a podcast is like a walking billboard for your business. It's your content, it's the stuff that you do well, that's out there, that lives on essentially forever, right? And you've got this library of information now, and your clients and potential clients can go to it to learn more about you and what you practice and what you sell. And that that almost eliminates the cold call, right? Because now they know who you are, and they've more than likely, hopefully, they like what you're selling, and they want to, when you actually get them on the phone, it's not a struggle to try to keep them on the phone. They're actually keeping you on the phone because they're so interested in what you do. So I think it's a walking billboard for success. I absolutely think more business owners and more business people should be using it. It's another tool to help sell your product or your service. So yeah, I would strongly encourage it to just about anybody.
All right. So I don't want a podcast. People have
Mhm.
asked me to put a podcast together.
Even though technically, Maureen, you're doing one kind of right now.
Right. That
Yeah.
was my question, is what's really the difference
There
between
is none.
having this great conversation, we're doing it live,
Mhm.
afterwards I'm able to put it on my website or YouTube, and I don't have all the introductions or have to do transcripts, and somehow I have it in my head that podcasts are maybe more complicated than they are, but what's the difference between us doing this and a podcast?
Okay, so the only really difference is, technically, by definition, a podcast is an audio platform. Okay, so, and you are doing this over video. So technically, this is not a podcast. That's really, in my opinion, the only difference. And something you just said, this is it isn't as complicated as you think. You could essentially take what we're doing right now, put it in video form, put it in audio form, and you just base out, without going into all the nitty gritty. You can put that audio up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the different podcast platforms, just by converting it into an audio form instead of video. And boom, you've got a podcast. And you don't necessarily, the beauty of podcasting is there really aren't a lot of rules to it. You could put it up just like this as is. You don't need big fanfare and lots of music, and you don't need a professional voiceover guy. It's all you need is this. This is what people are going for. One of the top reasons why people say they listen to podcasts is to learn, right? So they don't need all the fancy music and all the bells and whistles all the time. They're going there because they want to get right to the meat of it. They want to learn something or be entertained. And the music and all this, I think all that has to do with what we've been influenced by when it comes to, say, television watching. You get the music introduction, you might have a voiceover, all this stuff. It's not necessary with podcasting. Does it work? Yeah, sure. If you want to use the music and stuff, yeah, it might be a nice touch, but I think you want to be delicate about it. You don't want to go overboard with it either. So if somebody came to me like you and said, I want to make this a podcast, I don't want to overcomplicate it, it just has to be like this, maybe I want a little bit of editing here and there, I would say you could absolutely do that, no problem at all.
I love it. I love it. So, for small business owners, Mark's giving you some really good advice to use this as a marketing tool, and it isn't necessarily as heavy of a lift. And they could absolutely rock their business with it.
Oh yeah, and Maureen, if they are maybe on the fence about podcasting, or maybe they think I don't want to ever do a podcast, but they are still intrigued by the idea, be a guest on podcasts. put yourself out there and go on all the different podcasts that are within your genre, that are under your umbrella. It is such a great way of not having to do all the work and just show up, be you, be your best you, and sell your products and services. That is, it's a wonderful way to do it without having to invest as much time into it. And you
That's
can make your own schedule.
That's what I'm doing. I just was a guest on a podcast this week. I was the week prior, and I love every minute of it. It's a great conversation. It's just kind of like this. And it is no lift whatsoever other than, blocking an hour out of my calendar. And it elevates your authority. And that's what I say to entrepreneurs in their own business. You have to separate yourself from a lot of competitors. And this could be, if you just want them to do a guest type appearance, is a really good way to do it out there.
Yeah. And podcast audiences are super responsive. And I have a lot of theories as to why, but the thing that what I'm getting at is you can have people. It's an intimate experience for a podcast listener. There's something about it where when those earbuds are in their ears and they are usually, for the most part, by themselves, either doing some chores on a commute or whatever, it feels very intimate. It feels like they are a fly on the wall. And there are statistics out there that say podcast listeners are way more likely to purchase from either ads or from an endorsement that the host has, or a guest that the host has on their show. They're way more likely to buy if they hear it on a podcast than if they hear it on a radio show or on a television show. So you want to find ways, if you want to grow your business, you want to find some way to be a part of this industry. If you can't right now invest that time to do it yourself, get on somebody else's podcast.
I love it. I love it. So what would be your one piece of advice for a small business owner, maybe who's just starting, they're just starting their journey? They've left a job, they've lost a job, they're taking their side hustle to the next level. What words of wisdom do you have for them?
Now, when you ask me this, is this around podcasting or just in general?
Just in entrepreneurship.
I would say a few things probably, but I would say it's an opportunity. You have an opportunity now to craft the life that you want. And to me, what I've always found, like when I was laid off on that job, and I could probably list a million other things, but what I find is that when I finally make space by getting rid of the things that don't really speak to me or the things that I'm not passionate about, when I finally make space and I get rid of them, the opportunities start coming in. It's as if I have to clear out that space. Like if you want to refurnish a room, you got to get rid of the old furniture first, or else it's just going to be a bunch of clutter and you're not going to be able to enjoy that room. So get rid of the old, and whether you got rid of it or they got rid of it for you, now is the time to explore your passions, explore the things that light you up, and either find that better job or start that business that you've always dreamt about starting. Just go for it, because really the only thing stopping you is you.
Yeah, that's true. It is true. And I always say, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Look at the experience and the growth you have. And you can bring all of those new skills that you never knew you had to a company. Entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, but if it is a passion right now and you want to try it, and if it doesn't work out, there's no such thing as failure. It's just a learning experience.
Yes.
So I always say somebody should always either start their own business or go and work for a startup, because what you learn is so invaluable. It's just amazing.
Absolutely agree.
Marc, can you tell people first what makes you different for them to come to you versus somebody else who does what you do? And then I want you to tell people how to get a hold of you.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to give an answer that I don't think a lot of people probably would, and that is, ultimately, in the big picture, I don't think I'm that different from everybody else as far as in my industry goes. I think that podcasting is not rocket science, right? I think that most people can do it, and there are a lot of people that do what I do. I think that that is, and I'm good with that, because I believe that the people that are supposed to work with me are going to work with me. I think that the people who I resonate with, like anybody who's listening to us talk right now, I think there will be people that are like, yeah, this guy Mark, he's a pretty good guy, and I like what he has to say. I want to hear more. And then there'll probably be people that are going to be like, guy Mark, he doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, right? Whether they know what they're talking about or not, that's another story. But they might feel that way, and that's okay with me. I will attract the clients that I'm supposed to attract. I know that I know what I'm talking about. I know I've helped dozens and dozens and dozens of podcasters. So I know I do it well. And for the most part, most of them are still doing it to this day. So I believe that I will find the right people and they will find me. And I'm not going to worry about the ones that don't gel with me. So that's the basic way that I look at it. I think that maybe one of the biggest differences, if I had to give you an answer, would be my experience. There are not many podcasters out there that can say they've worked at this for 16 years.
Yeah.
I started when it was a baby,
Yeah.
and people still think it's a baby to this day. And yeah, it's been around a lot longer than most people think. So I think my experience alone is probably what separates me from most others doing what I do.
I would agree with you on both points, but you walked the walk. And I think that's super important. So if
Yeah.
people want to reach out to you and those right people are attracted to you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. Well, I will first give my website address. So that's IRonick Media. And IRonick is spelled CK, you can see behind me there.
That's what I love about this name, is
Yeah.
that it's your last name, and yet
Yeah.
I'm all over it.
Thanks. So that would be the best way, because then you can find everything there as far as where I am on social media. But I will tell your audience that the best place on social media, there are two where you can find me most active, and that is Instagram and that is Clubhouse, the social audio app. So those are my main focuses. I'm absolutely on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, all that stuff. But yeah, either my website, ironickmedia.com, Instagram, or Clubhouse.
Love
And
it.
by the way, at Marc Ronick, MarcRonick, on both of those social platforms.
Great, great. Well, once you get settled in Asheville, by the new year,
Mhm.
I hope you'll come back
Yeah.
and let us know how the entrepreneurial journey is continuing for you. And if you obviously will continue learning more and more, and I hope you'll share that story.
I absolutely will share, and I absolutely will be back, because my mom and dad will not allow it if I'm gone for too long. So
Yep. Yep. We'll be doing it over coffee this time. So,
good, good.
well, thank you so much. When I say I bring rock stars to help other entrepreneurs who are doing this too and are striving for, excellence and success, I hope this is helping those out there. But you're a rock star entrepreneur, and I have really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Maureen. I enjoyed it too. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
So for those of you out there, if you would like to be a rock star entrepreneur and talk about rock star conversations in entrepreneurship, please reach out to me at 8simplesteps.net. And if you're looking for somebody to partner with who takes the hard out of the process of entrepreneurship, whether you're starting, you're building, you're scaling, or even if you're having to turn around your business, let's have a conversation so that we can get you on the right path. The whole goal here is for you to thrive and survive, especially in a sea of competitors. So reach out to me if you'd like to be a guest. Reach out to me if you need a little bit of direction. And I will see you next week with another rock star. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great night.